The manager half the office was quietly in love with, kissed me to win an argument, and I was the only person in that room who understood it was going to ruin us both. It happened at the staff mixer. The whole branch crammed into the break room, in front of everyone. Weston had him cornered, sleeve pinched between two fingers, saying it loud enough that the regional director turned to listen, that the two of them should stop pretending and just make it official. And I watched Silas, who could talk his way out of a collapsing building, who had never once in my hearing let a person leave a conversation feeling small, run head first into the one thing charm does not fix, which is someone who will not hear the word no. I watched him look for an exit and not find one. And then his eyes landed on me, the analyst in the corner who had never wanted him, and I understood a breath before he moved that he was about to use me to get free. He came around Weston, took my wrist, and kissed me like we had been doing it for years. Any sane Omega would have shoved him off. Instead, I felt the heel of his palm settle over the scent gland under my collar, wrist to neck, direct contact, and every alarm I had spent years installing went off at once, because I knew what that kind of contact could do and he did not. So I did the only thing my body would allow, which was kiss him back. A man who kisses you and gets nothing looks like a man who made a mistake, and I was not going to be a mistake in front of the people who signed my paychecks. Then it bloomed. It came up between us fast, warm and green and stony all at once. A smell like a mowed field the morning after cutting, sweet grass drying over sun-warmed rock, and it was not his scent, and it was not mine. It was a third thing, and it rolled off both of us into that overheated little room until the coworker nearest the door said it out loud. "Oh!" Weston's hand came off Silas's sleeve. The director's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Somebody's soda can stopped halfway to their mouth. Silas drew back an inch with the pleased, almost smug look of a man who thinks he just pulled off something clever, and I realized he was waiting to be thanked. He had no idea. He thought he had bought his way out of an awkward night. He did not know that a scent like that does not happen by accident, that it does not wash off by morning, that it takes days, and it takes a rare kind of match, and that the two of us had just announced a fact about our bodies to the entire company, a fact I had spent my whole adult life making sure no one would ever learn about me again. So I closed my hand around his wrist, the one still warm at my throat, and I pulled it down between us where no one else could see, and I held it there like evidence. I put my mouth close to his ear, and under the noise of a whole floor, pretending not to stare, I told him the truth that was about to take both our lives apart. "That is not going to wash off," I said, low, only for him. "Not tonight, not for days. I know exactly what you just did, even if you don't. So we are going to walk out of this room, and then you are going to sit down, and you are going to listen to me, because you just started something neither of us knows how to stop." One thing before we start. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. I love reading every one. Now, get comfortable. You're going to want to hear this. I analyze data for a regional insurance company on the near side of Pittsburgh, a branch spread across 2 floors of a building that used to be a bank. And I am good at exactly one thing, which is seeing the shape of a problem before anyone else does. Give me a wall of claims and a broker threatening to walk his book across the river, and I will show you which numbers are lying and why. It is the only kind of certainty I have ever fully trusted. People are weather. Numbers hold still. I came to that branch to be left alone. That was the whole plan. I had debt the size of a second life, the kind that turns a person permanently careful, and I wanted a quiet desk in a quiet corner where I could do excellent work and go home and read about birds and rocks and beetles until the world made sense again. I did not want to be noticed. I had been noticed once, thoroughly, and I had learned what it costs. And then there was Silas. You have to understand what he was in that building, because I spent my first months there refusing to feel it and feeling it anyway. He ran the floor like other people breathe, without effort, without ever raising his voice, 100 small corrections a day that added up to a place people actually liked coming to work. He got in before the lights came up on the timers. He knew whose numbers would go soft before they did. He remembered the names of everyone's spouses. And he was an alpha who never once used it as a weapon, which in my experience made him rarer than he had any right to be, and the whole office loved him for it. quietly, like you love good weather. I did not love him. I want that on the record, because of what comes later. I was the one person on that floor who did not arrange himself towards Silas when he walked in, and I did it on purpose, and I think that is the only reason any of this happened. He was used to a room bending toward him. I did not bend. He noticed the not bending like you notice a door that does not open when you lean on it, and he started inventing reasons to stand at my desk, and I gave him nothing. And the nothing seemed to interest him more than anything else in the building. There was a story people told about him, and I collected it, like I collect everything, filed it, turned it over on slow afternoons. The winter before I started, the building had lost power in an ice storm on a Friday night, and instead of sending one of the people whose actual job it was, Silas had driven in through the ice, alone, and sat in the dark server room resetting the failover so that the following week would open clean, and no one would ever know there had been a Friday. He told it himself, as a joke, the punchline being that nothing ran without him, and everyone laughed. I did not laugh. I heard something else in it that I could not name yet, something that sat wrong under the charm. A man who would rather spend a freezing Friday alone in an empty building than admit he had nowhere he would rather be. I did not have a word for it then. I do now. But I am getting ahead of myself. What I will say about me, so the rest makes sense, is that I trust things I can verify, and almost nothing else. I keep field guides, dozens of them, birds and trees and rocks and beetles, the whole living world cataloged and named and reliable, and I read them, like other people watch television, because there is a particular piece in a thing that is exactly what the book says it is. People are not like that. People say warmth and mean leverage. Cyrus had taught me that, and the debt had reinforced it, and by the time I got to that branch, I had made a quiet religion out of certainty, and I was not looking to convert. I wanted a corner and a chart, and to be left alone. And then a man who fixed things in the dark, so no one would see the seam, started standing at my desk, and I could not read him. And being unable to read a person is, for me, the single most dangerous thing in the world. The first real conversation we had, I corrected him in front of half the floor, and I was right. He had walked a renewal problem out onto the floor, one of those broker accounts that looks like it is bleeding, and he had already decided the fix, because he always had, and he was reading the room the confident way he read every room. I did not look up from my screen. That account isn't losing money, I said. Your loss ratio is distorted by 3 catastrophe claims that all closed in the same quarter. Strip the outliers, and it's your second best book on the floor. I turned my laptop around so he could see the chart. I had built it a week earlier because I had watched the shape of his mistake coming and had simply been waiting for him to arrive at it. The floor went quiet in the particular way it does when someone contradicts the person everyone likes. Silas looked at the chart. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Send me that." And I told him it was already in his inbox with the raw pull attached in case he wanted to check my work, and I turned back to my screen. I did not soften it. I did not do the little apology people do when they realize they have crossed him. I just let him catch up. What I did not expect was his face when he did. It was not irritation. A lot of managers do not enjoy being corrected by the youngest person in the room. He looked, if anything, relieved, like a man who had been waiting a long time for someone to hand him something true instead of something pleasant, and that look stayed with me longer than I wanted, and I told myself it meant nothing, and I was wrong, but not in the way I feared. So when Weston cornered him at the mixer, and Silas panicked and reached for the nearest person he could plausibly pretend to be seeing, he reached for me, and I was neither the safe choice nor the kind one. I was the one person in the building who had never once fallen for him, which I have thought about a great deal since, because I have come to believe that is exactly why I was the one who felt real to him. You already know how the kiss went. We took the stairs, because the elevator meant standing still with the whole floor watching, and I went down them fast, and he followed, and we ended up in the little print room on 2 where the good copier lived and no one went after 5. I shut the door. The combined scent came with us and thickened in that small space, cut hay over warm stone, sweet and mineral, and I could feel it working on both of us, and I made myself talk, because talking is what I do when a thing frightens me. I pack the fear inside information so there is no room left for it to move. A kiss does not do this, I said. I need you to hear that first, because you're going to spend the next hour telling yourself it was just a kiss, and it wasn't. Scent transfers through gland contact. Neck, wrists, the inside of the elbow. You had your wrist gland flat against my neck gland for the better part of 10 seconds. That's the mechanism. That's the only mechanism. I gestured at the air between us, at the third scent hanging there. But contact alone gives you a smudge. A little of me on you, gone by morning. It does not give you this. This is a resonance. Both of us are producing a compound neither of us makes alone, and it will keep producing for days. And it does not happen at 10 seconds of contact unless the two glands are, biologically speaking, a very close match. The closer the match, the louder the echo. This one is loud. He asked me how close. He asked it carefully, like a man who already suspected the answer. Close, I said. The kind of close I have spent 5 years making sure never happened to me again, and you did it in a break room to get out of a conversation. That stopped him. Not the science, the 5 years. He filed it and did not ask, and I was grateful, because even then I could tell that Silas was the sort of person who, if you handed him a problem, would try to solve it, and I did not want to be solved. So we wait for it to fade, he said. You said days. We could. I rubbed my eyes under my glasses. Except the whole company just watched their favorite manager scent match with the analyst nobody talks to, and we host the broker appreciation gala this week, and you were supposed to work it with Weston hanging off your elbow. If we walk this back on Monday, Weston gets his story back. That you'd never really pick someone like me. That it was a fluke. And then he keeps doing exactly what he's been doing. Except now he's humiliated. And humiliated people are not gentle. And I get to be the office punchline who thought he had a shot at the boss. For a week. Maybe 2. I've done a week or 2 of that. I would rather not. He thought about it. And then he built a clean story on the spot. Like he built everything. And he was good at it. And that was the first thing that scared me about him. We would let it stand through the gala. We were, for the record, seeing each other quietly. New. Nobody's business. Weston would back off, because there would be nothing to push against. And the echo would do its own convincing. And when it faded, we would let the thing cool, like real ones do. And no one would be anyone's punchline. You're good at this, I said. And I did not mean it as a compliment. You just made the frictionless option sound like the reasonable one. Those aren't always the same thing. I pulled a chair out and sat, finally, and set my hands flat on the little table like a man about to sign something, because if we were doing this, I wanted terms, in words, so there was no drift. You don't touch me unless we've agreed a scene needs it. When we do have to sell it, you tell me first, so I'm never caught off guard. It ends the day the echo's gone. Clean. Both of us walk. And you do not, under any circumstances, decide what's best for me and handle it behind my back. If a problem comes up, you bring it to me. You don't fix it and tell me after. I've been fixed before. I didn't like it. Agreed, he said. All of it, say the last one back to me. He looked at me, and I watched him understand that this was the one that mattered. I don't fix things for you behind your back, he said. Anything comes up, I bring it to you first. Okay. I let out a breath, and some of the fast went out of me. And in the ugly fluorescent light of that little room, without the whole floor watching, he looked at me like I was the most interesting problem he had run into in a long time. And the cut hay smell of the two of us wrapped around us both. And I had the unmanageable thought that I would like to know why a man that liked was reaching so hard for the one person who did not like him back. For the record, he said, I'm sorry. I put you in this without asking. That's exactly the thing you just told me not to do, and I did it before you could even write the rule. I had not expected the apology, which told me a good deal about the people who had come before him. Yeah, I said. You did. And then, because it was true, thank you for saying so. We did not touch on the way out. We did not need to. The building already smelled like us. The days after that were an education in a thing I thought I understood, which was being seen. I had spent years making myself unwatchable, and now I walked through my own workplace as half of a pair, and being half of a pair is a completely different set of physics. People watched us, kindly, mostly, delighted even, because an office loves nothing so much as a quiet romance to narrate. And I handled the attention the only way I knew, by pretending it did not exist, which somehow made it more convincing than any performance could have. We got good at the small mechanics of it. Silas learned I went silent and clipped when I was overwhelmed, not cold, just conserving, and that the fix was to sit near me and let the quiet be shared, instead of talking at me. I learned that he ran hot before a claims deadline, and I started leaving a black coffee on his desk without being asked, because I had watched what he drank as closely as I watched everything and logged it. We told ourselves this was maintenance, keeping the story consistent. Neither of us said the obvious thing, which was that nothing about it felt like work. He caught me off guard exactly once during that stretch, which is more than anyone had managed in years. He came by my desk at the end of a long day and set down a used paperback, an old field guide to freshwater fish of all things, dog-eared and water-stained, and said he had found it in a box at his building's little free library and thought of me. And then he left before I could construct a defense. It was not an expensive thing. It was not a grand thing. It was worse than either, because it meant he had been paying attention, had filed away the paperbacks against my monitor and how I read at lunch, and had gone looking, quietly, for a thing I would like, and had asked for nothing in return, not even the pleasure of watching me receive it. I sat there with the ruined little book in my hands for a long time. Cyrus had given me gifts too, big ones, the kind that arrive with a receipt in the emotional sense, the kind you are expected to pay back in obedience. This was the opposite of that, and the opposite of that was the one thing I had no armor against, and I think if you want to know the moment I was actually in trouble, it was not the kiss. It was a wet paperback about fish. The first time we had to sell it in the wild was a lunch with Delaney, one of the branch's largest brokers, a man who moved enough business through us to make the regional office nervous, and who had a habit of testing whoever sat across from him to see how fast they folded. Weston set the lunch up, because Weston set up everything that touched the big accounts, and Weston made sure to be there, across from us, his suspicion tucked behind a smile. Delaney ran his usual move. He waited until the entrees came, and then leaned back and said the account was underperforming, and a competitor was calling, and maybe it was time to talk honestly about whether our branch could keep his book. It was theater. Silas had scrambled charmingly for him every year, given him a discount he did not need and a lunch he did not pay for, because that was the frictionless thing, and it kept the business. I did not scramble. I set down my fork, slid a folded page across the table, and told him his book was not underperforming, that he had moved 3 properties into a higher risk tier last spring and then compared this year's premiums to last year's like nothing had changed, that this was not a decline. It was him repricing his own risk and blaming us for the invoice, and that the competitor quoting him lower was either missing the tier change or planning to reprice him in year 2, and that I would want to know which before I signed anything. Then I picked my fork back up and told him the salmon was good and he should try it. There was a silence at that table. I would have paid money to keep. Delaney looked at the page. He looked at me. Then he laughed, a real bark of a laugh, and said, "Where'd you find this one, Silas?" And Silas said, "He found me," which was true in more ways than the table knew, and Weston's smile had gone small and stiff across from us. We kept the account at full rate, and walking back along the wet sidewalk, half a step apart, I caught Silas looking at me like he could not quite place what he was feeling. "You could have warned me you were going to do that," he said. "I could have, but then you'd have managed it, softened it, given him a way to save face." I glanced at him. I didn't want him to save face. "He's been robbing this branch for 3 years with a card trick. I don't like card tricks." "No," he said. "I'm learning that about you. The one time we came close to breaking the first rule was in the file room, late, both of us there, for real reasons that happened to be the same reason." He reached past me for a box on a high shelf, and his wrist came near my throat, not touching, a few inches of air, and the echo surged just from the nearness, both glands answering each other across the gap, and I heard his breath catch, and felt my own do the same. We stood like that, close, the box forgotten, in his hand. This close, I could smell him under the shared scent, the actual him, the thing his glands made when nobody had kissed him into a resonance, and it was nothing like the palate the romance novels promise. He smelled like sun-warmed sandstone and black walnut, with a thin, bright edge of struck flint, dry and mineral and grounded, a scent that told you exactly who he was before he opened his mouth, a man built to hold still while everything moved around him. And I knew he could smell mine too, the pressed grass and lemon balm of me, and worse, the thing underneath it, the ripe blackberry that only surfaced when my guard dropped, which meant my guard had dropped, which was the whole problem. That was why the two of us together made the field after cutting smell, his dry stone and my green sweetness turning into a third thing that was neither. Knowing the chemistry of it did not help. Naming a thing has never once stopped it. That's the compatibility, I said. And my voice had gone rough at the edges in a way it never did on the floor. It responds to nearness. You don't even have to touch. That's how you know it's a real match and not just contact. The glands reach. Is that science, or is that you talking yourself out of something? He said, which was more honest than I was ready for. I did not answer that. I took the box out of his hand, set it down, and stepped back into safe air, and neither of us reached for the shelf again. I told him about before on a gray afternoon when the office had gone home, and the two of us stayed to close out the quarter, and I think I told him because the numbers were done, and there was nothing left to hide behind. His name was Cyrus, college. An alpha, older, the kind of confident that reads as safety until you are inside it. We had matched like this, an echo this loud, and Cyrus had used it like a deed. If you're a match, then you're mine. That was the whole logic. And I was 19 and did not yet know that a body agreeing with another body is not the same as a person choosing. He wanted to bond on his timeline. He wanted me to follow him to the coast, wanted my whole life arranged around the fact of the scent. And when I said I wanted to finish school first, that I wanted to choose it instead of be swept into it, he told everyone who would listen that I was broken. That an omega who could feel a match that strong and still resist it had something wrong with him. It stuck. People believe in alpha. I spent the rest of my time in school as the omega who was too cold to want his own perfect match, and somewhere in there I decided I would never again let a smell make a decision my mind had not signed off on. So you see the problem? I said, still looking at the spreadsheet and not at him. This is the exact thing. The loud echo, the everyone can smell it. The story that writes itself. My body did it again, in a break room, for a reason that had nothing to do with me. And I can already feel myself starting to wonder if maybe the smell knows something I don't. I made myself look up. It doesn't. I need it to not. Do you understand why I need you to keep this a story? Yes, he said. And I believed that he did. And I also understood, sitting there in the empty office, smelling like a field at dawn, that I was losing an argument I had promised myself I would never have again. The Broker Appreciation Gala was the branch's one glamorous night, held in the atrium of a downtown hotel, and Silas had hosted it for years like he did everything, flawlessly. This year he worked it with me a half step behind his shoulder, and it was the best I had ever seen him, and the strange thing was that it did not feel like performance. We had worked out a system on the drive over without naming it. When a broker cornered him with a complaint he could not escape, I appeared with a number that ended the conversation. When an executive backed me into small talk I had no patience for, he arrived with a hand at the small of my back and a story that let me off the hook. Near the coat check, an older broker's wife took his arm and told him she had never seen him look so settled, that for years she had watched him run these nights like a man conducting an orchestra he did not get to enjoy, and that this year he looked like he was actually at the party. I heard it, and I looked away, and I did not let myself finish the thought. The trouble was that I was enjoying it too, and I could not afford to be. I stood at the edge of that warm, loud room with a scent on my skin that was half his, watching him remember a junior underwriter's kid's name, watching him steer a difficult client toward the good side of a bad quarter without the client ever feeling steered, and I felt the thing I had promised myself I would never feel again start to move in me, low and warm and traitorous. I told myself it was the echo. I told myself it was proximity and biology, and a compound my glands were manufacturing against my will. I had a whole speech ready for myself about how none of it was real, and I had almost gotten through it when he wove back through the crowd to me with 2 glasses of water, because he had noticed I do not drink at work things, and he handed me one without a word and stood beside me and let the party happen around us, and the speech fell apart in my hands. Weston found us by the bar. He had been drinking, and the pleasant mask had thinned, and under it was the thing I had spent the whole month refusing to look at directly. He set his glass down too hard. "Come on, Silas," he said, loud enough to turn the nearest heads. "You can drop the act now. We're all friends here. Everybody knows this isn't real. You'd never." He flicked his chin at me. "Him? Please. This is a stunt to make me back off, and it worked. Congratulations. But you don't have to keep humiliating yourself in front of the whole company." And I felt it land. Felt the calm I wore like a coat go thin. Because this was the exact thing, the story writing itself in front of the people I worked with, the Omega who thought he had a shot, and any second now it was going to become the truth of the room, whether it was true or not. Silas set his drink down. He turned to me, and he said, low, only for me, breaking the first rule the one clean way he knew how, "I'm going to touch you now." Tell me no, and I stop. I did not tell him no. I have gone back to that decision more times than I can count, because everything after it grew from that one silence, and I have never once been able to wish it away. He brought his hand up to the side of my neck, thumb along my jaw, and he leaned in slow, past the corner of my mouth, to the place under my ear where the gland sat, and he scented me, deliberately, the way you only do with someone you are claiming in front of God and the brokers. A slow press of his wrist to my throat, while the whole bar watched. The echo bloomed up between us, louder than the break room, cut hay and warm stone rolling out into the crowd until the people nearest us actually stepped back to give it room, and Weston's face fell open, and in the small, cruel arithmetic of the evening, it was a total victory, except that somewhere in the middle of it, I felt it stop being a performance for him, and I felt it stop being a performance for me. And both of those were catastrophes. Because I could feel everything, that was the thing about a match this close, and I felt the exact instant his want turned real, felt it go from a point he was making into something with my name on it, enormous and unguarded, and my own body answered it before my mind could get a hand on the wheel. I turned my face just enough to put my lips at his ear, and under all that noise, only for him, in a voice I did not recognize as mine, I said, "Don't. If you do this and mean it, I won't be able to tell anymore. I won't be able to tell if I chose you or if it chose you for me. Please don't make it real. I can't survive it being real." And he was still trying to find an answer, still half inside the scent of me with his whole careful reputation coming apart very quietly against my throat, when the director's voice cut across the atrium from the little stage, tapping a microphone, thanking us all for coming, saying he had one piece of news before the toast, an exciting realignment, a consolidation of certain back-office functions to the regional hub, effective at quarter's end, and I stood there with Silas's wrist against my throat and felt my job, my quiet corner, my whole reason for being in that building, announced out of existence to a room, raising its glasses. The toast went on above our heads while the floor dropped out from under me. Glasses lifted all across the atrium for the exciting realignment, and I stood very still under Silas's hands, with my job dissolving into applause, and I felt him change beside me. I did not have to look. I could feel it in his scent, the sharpening, the shift from a man half lost in me to a man already 3 moves into a plan, and I knew exactly what he was doing, because he did it with everything. He was solving it. The consolidation sent my role to the hub, which meant a move, which meant uprooting the careful, debt-braced life I had built in one apartment across the river, and somewhere between the salad and the toast, Silas had already found the lever and started reaching for it. I stepped out from under his hands. "Don't," I said, before he had said anything. I didn't. "You were about to. I could feel you doing it." I was looking at the stage, not at him, and my voice had gone flat, the conserving flat, the register I use when a thing is too big to let move around inside me. "They just cut my job, And your first thought was how you were going to fix it. It's the nicest thing about you, and it's the thing I'm most afraid of. Take me home, not yours, mine. So he took me home, to my place, not his. Before I tell you what he did wrong, and he did it thoroughly, I want you to see my apartment, because it is the one room where I had ever been entirely myself, and letting him into it was a bigger surrender than the kiss. One room and a kitchen barely worth the name, and books floor to ceiling, the field guides, the spines cracked from real use. He stood in the middle of it and looked at all of them, and he did not make a joke, which is what people usually do, and he did not call it charming, which is worse. He just looked, and then he said, quietly, that it made sense. That of course the person who read the shape of every problem on the floor would want the whole world named and sorted and reliable. And I felt found in a way I had spent years making sure would never happen again. You want tea? I said, because I needed something to do with my hands. He had not touched the champagne at the gala. I had noticed. I was always noticing him now, which was its own kind of alarm. He said he wanted tea. I made it. My hands were not quite steady on the kettle, and he pretended not to see, and I understood that he had already learned. The kindest thing he could do for me was let me keep the parts of myself I had not offered. We did not talk about the job. We talked about the field guides. I pulled one down and showed him how to tell two nearly identical sparrows apart by a single mark on the wing, and I got fast and bright, like I only get about the things nobody has ever used against me. And he sat on my one couch in his good suit and listened like it mattered, and I felt myself handing him piece after piece of the real thing without meaning to. It was somewhere in that quiet that his rut announced itself, early, months ahead of when it should have come, and I smelled it turn before he said a word, the warm, restless sharpening of an alpha's scent going urgent, and I knew instantly why, because I was the one who understood the mechanism. Days of the two of us producing a compound that told his body it had found a match, a compatible omega near and unclaimed, sitting across from him with every guard down, over a stack of bird books. His body had done the math, his mouth would not. And I watched a man who could talk his way out of anything go quiet, and set his tea down very carefully, and stand. I have to go, he said. You're going into rut, I said. I could barely get the words out. Every instinct I had was leaning toward the warm, certain smell of him, and I hated how much I wanted him to stay, and I hated more that I could not tell how much of the wanting was mine. Early, because of this, because of us. He kept his hands at his sides, and I could see what it cost him. And I am not going to be within a mile of you when it lands, because the whole thing, the thing you told me you couldn't survive, is not being able to tell what's you and what's your body. If I stay, I take that choice away from you. I'm not going to do that. Not to win you, and not to be sweet, and not for any reason at all. He got his coat. I'm sorry it's loud in here. I'll fix the loud by leaving, which is the only fixing you'll let me do, so let me do it. And he left. He walked out into the cold with a scent on his skin that would not fade and a want I could smell from across the room. And he left, because I had asked him to protect the one thing I could not protect myself, and he had listened. I stood in the middle of my apartment full of certainties and understood that I had just watched an alpha do the exact opposite of the thing that had broken me at 19, and that I was in more danger than I had ever been in my life, because you can armor yourself against a man who takes. There is no armor, for a man who gives you back your own choice and then walks away from it. I did not hear from him for days. He did not call, not once, and I knew what those days were for him. And I sat with the echo on my own skin, and a want that had his name on it, and I did not call either. And I told myself we had both done the right thing. Those were strange days. I went to work, and he was not there. And the floor felt it. A room that has lost its weather. Everyone a little colder and a little slower, without quite knowing why. I did my numbers. I read my field guides at night and could not hold a single fact in my head, which had never happened to me before, because facts were the one thing that had always stayed put. One of those nights I stood in my kitchen and caught the last of the cut hay smell coming off my own collar and had to sit down on the floor, not because I was overwhelmed, I want to be precise, but because I was doing the exact math I had sworn I would never do again, wondering whether a body could be that wrong about a person, wondering whether all that armor had actually been protecting me or just keeping me alone, and I did not have an answer. And I have never in my life been able to stand not having an answer. He came back clear-headed and certain and completely wrong, and here is what he did. He fixed my job. I found out from Roland. Roland ran the front office and had been at the branch longer than anyone, a quiet omega in his 50s, who saw everything and said almost none of it. And the revised org chart came across his desk, with my role quietly exempted from a company-wide consolidation. And Roland knew exactly what he was looking at, because he had spent a lifetime learning to read the fingerprints of powerful people who fix things for the ones they love. He came to my desk at the end of a day and told me, plainly, because he thought I deserved to know who I was really deciding about. Silas had gone to the regional director. He had spent years of favors and the simple fact of being Silas, and he had carved my role out of the consolidation and kept it in the building. Permanent, protected, and he had done it in an afternoon. And he had not told me because he wanted to hand it to me himself, the one thing I was most afraid of losing, saved by him. I went to his office with the door already closing behind me. "You saved my job," I said. He stood up. "Jude, you went to the director. You used 10 years of favors and the fact that you're you, and you carved me out of a company decision, and you did it while you were still in rut recovery, and you were going to hand it to me like flowers." I was not loud. I have never been loud. Loud was never the danger with me. I wrote one rule. One. I said it out loud in the print room, and I made you say it back, and you said it back, and then you did the precise opposite the first chance you got. "Because they were going to make you move," he said, and I heard him hear how it sounded even as he said it. The fixer, explaining why the fix was justified. "Because you built a life here, and I wasn't going to watch it get erased by people who never met you when I could stop it with a phone call. I know you weren't." My voice cracked on the "you" once, and I pushed through it. That's the whole problem. You'll never watch anything get erased. You'll always stop it with a phone call. You saved me the way you reset the servers in the ice storm, alone, in the dark, so I'd never have to know there was a Friday. And I'd have woken up grateful, and I'd have never once found out if I could have saved myself. I made myself breathe. I can't tell anymore. Do you hear me? That was the one thing. The scent chose you for me, and now you've saved my whole life for me. And if I stay, I will never, as long as I live, know if any of it was mine. You've handled me, just like everyone I've ever let close eventually handles me, except you did it gently, which somehow makes it worse. It was real at the gala, he said. It was the truest thing he had. I could hear that. I felt it turn. That wasn't a fix. That was me. I know it was. And that was the thing that nearly finished me, because I had felt it turn too, and I could not trust a single thing I had felt, because he had already handed me a job and a story and a smell I had not chosen. That's why I have to go. A person can't build a life standing on ground somebody else keeps pouring under his feet. I'm declining the carve-out. I'm taking the hub transfer. I'm going to go somewhere nobody has ever heard of me, where no manager is in love with me, and I'm going to find out what I want when nothing is being handed to me. I put my hand on the door. Don't call. Don't fix this. For once, let something go unfixed. I left, and I made it all the way to my car before my hands started shaking, and I sat in the cold and did not let myself go back up, because going back up was exactly the thing that had cost Roland his whole adult life. And I was not going to be another cautionary tale filed in a careful man's memory. The days after that were an arithmetic. I do not recommend. I had told Silas the echo would fade on a schedule, and now I got to live inside that schedule, and I had never wanted my own science to be wrong so badly. The first mornings it was still loud, still the cut hay smell rolling off my skin when I turned in bed, and for a few seconds before I remembered, I was almost happy, which was worse than any grief, because then I had to remember all over again. Then it thinned. I packed the field guides into boxes, one shelf at a time, and every box I filled was a piece of the only home I had ever chosen, and I was choosing to carry it somewhere no one knew me. And I kept telling myself that was the point, that a thing you can only keep by letting someone else guard it was never really yours. I saw him across the floor and he did not look well. Neither of us spoke. The whole office felt the shift and had the decency to say nothing, and Weston, who should have been triumphant, mostly looked frightened, because a punchline is fun and a funeral is not, and even Weston could tell which one this was. Once, near the end of a long day, our eyes met over the tops of 2 monitors, like they had that first week, and he held it, and I saw that he was suffering exactly as much as I was, and I looked back down at my screen, because I had drawn a line and I was going to honor it. Even though it was taking something out of me, I was not sure I would get back. I started drafting messages I did not send. I got as far as his name in the field more times than I will admit, and then I would put the phone face down and go back to the boxes, because there was nothing I could type that would not undo the whole reason I was leaving. If I called him, he would fix it. That was the awful certainty of him. He would find a way to make the hurt go away before I had finished feeling it, and I needed to finish feeling it, because a feeling you are not allowed to finish is a feeling someone else has decided you should not have. So I let the silence stand, and I hated it, and I kept packing. The fade had its own cruelty, each day a little emptier than the one before. By the middle of that gray stretch, I had to lift my own wrist right to my face to find any trace of us at all, and I lay awake rationing it, the last of a smell I had spent years swearing I would never let matter, and hating that it mattered now, that it was leaving. I told myself this was the proof I had wanted. This was what choosing from zero felt like. And it felt like standing in an emptying apartment holding a wrist to your nose in the dark, trying to memorize a thing before it was gone, and understanding for the first time that I had never actually wanted the echo to be false. I had only wanted to be the one who got to decide it was true. Roland found me one of those evenings, in the file room, of all places, where the whole thing had almost tipped over once. He did not make it a lecture. He set a box down and helped me pack, and after a while he told me a thing I had never asked and he had never offered. People only tell you the true story of their life when they think it might spare you your own. He had been my age once, a careful omega with plans, and he had matched with an alpha, not a loud echo like ours, a good steady thing. And the alpha had gotten a job in this city, and Roland had followed, because that is what you did. Because the alpha had arranged it all so beautifully, the apartment, the move, the introductions, everything handled, and Roland had never had to lift a finger or make a single decision, and he had been grateful, and the gratitude had felt like love for a long time. He fixed everything, Roland said. Every problem I ever had, before I even knew I had it. I spent 30 years being taken care of, and one day he was gone, and I looked up and realized I had never once found out what I would have done, where I'd have gone, who I'd have been if nobody had ever handed me the map. He taped a box shut. So I know exactly what you're walking away from, and I want to tell you you're right, because you are. But I'm going to tell you the other half too, because you're young and I wasn't given the other half in time. He looked at me. The tragedy wasn't that he took care of me. It was that he never once left me a single problem to solve on my own. Not one. If he had ever, even once, stood back and let me fight something and lose, or win it myself, I might have stayed a whole person inside that love. Your Silas handled you. That's real, and you're right to hate it. But watch what he does next, Jude. A man who can't stop fixing is a tragedy. A man who learns to stand back and let you bleed a little because he trusts you to win, that's something else. I never got to find out which one I married. You still might. Then he handed me the tape, and we finished the boxes, and I drove home and did not sleep, because he had put a crack in the clean certainty I had built my whole exit around, and I do not like cracks in certainties, and I could not make this one close. So I stopped waiting to be rescued, and I did the thing that was entirely mine. I built a case, a real one, numbers deep, showing exactly what the branch would lose the day it shipped its analytics to a hub that had never met Delaney and could not tell a repricing trick from a decline. I documented the account I had saved over salmon. I modeled the ones that would walk without someone local who could read them. I did not build it to keep my job, because I had already refused the version of the job that came as a gift. I built it because it was true, and I do not like card tricks, and shipping local knowledge to a spreadsheet in another city to save a line item was the biggest card trick of all. Then I took it to the regional review and presented it myself. Weston tried to bury it. This is the part where you might expect Silas to have ridden in, and he didn't, and that turned out to be the whole point. I stood up in that meeting and made my case, and Weston stood up and said the numbers were inflated, that I was a disgruntled employee, padding a file to save a job I already knew I was losing, that the whole thing was personal, and I did not look at Silas, and Silas did not stand up, and I felt the absence of his help like a missing stare, a lurch that felt for 1 second like betrayal, right up until I understood what it actually was. He was letting me fight my own fight. For the first time, someone who could have handled it for me was sitting on his hands and trusting me to win. It was the loneliest and most respected I had ever felt in the same breath. I won it with data. I pulled up the repricing on Delaney's book, the exact trick I had caught at lunch, and showed the room that the hub's model had already missed it once in the transition files, a 6-figure miss. Sitting right there in the migration Weston was championing. I was calm. I was exact. I never once made it about the relationship, because when Weston pushed, I did not raise my voice, and I did not appeal to anyone above him, and I did not try to win the room's sympathy. I just went back to the numbers, one line at a time, and let them do what numbers do, which is refuse to care how anyone feels about them. The director pushed where he always pushed, and I answered without opening a second file, because I had already run every objection he could raise before I walked in, the same way I had once run the shape of Silas's mistake a week before he made it. The review kept the analytics function local, on merit, and named my model the reason, and it was mine, start to finish, with Silas's fingerprints nowhere on it. Weston left that meeting smaller than I had ever seen him, and I felt no triumph, only a tired kind of mercy, because I recognized him. He was a man who had confused wanting to be near someone with being owed them, and I had been close enough to that cliff myself, once to feel the wind off it. And then Roland told me the last piece, the one that undid me. While I had been building my own case, Silas had gone back to the director and spent the last of his favors undoing his. He had told them to remove the exemption, to let the consolidation proceed exactly as the numbers dictated, to strip out the special arrangement he had leaned on them to make, so that whatever happened to my job happened on merit and nothing else. He had given back the one thing that had made me feel small, and he had done it knowing it might mean I would leave anyway, knowing it might mean I would go to the hub and out of his life on the strength of a decision he could no longer touch. He had made himself powerless on purpose. For a man like Silas, I understood that was not a gesture. It was an amputation. I waited until the echo was gone. That mattered to me more than I can explain. I waited until there was not one molecule of the two of us left on my skin, until nothing biological could be accused of doing the choosing, and then I did not wait for him to come to me. I went to him. Because I had learned the one thing I had been missing, which was that choosing is not something you do by refusing to be swept. Choosing is something you walk across a cold parking lot and do with your own feet. He opened his door and looked at my empty hands first. He always read the whole situation before he read the person. "I'm not here because you fixed anything," I said. "You didn't. You gave it all back. I saved my own job. I beat Weston with a chart. I did all of it without you, on purpose, and you let me. And I know what it cost you to sit on your hands in that room. I made myself keep going, because I had crossed a parking lot to say it and I was not going to flinch now. Roland told me you pulled the exemption, that you spent your last favors making sure the only reason I'm still here is me. So, there's nothing left that you've done. You're standing there with nothing to hold over me and nothing to hand me, and I know exactly how much you hate that. And you did it anyway." He did not say anything. He held the door and let me stand in it, and then, because he was braver than I had given him credit for, he said the thing out loud, the thing I think he had spent his whole life not saying. "I kept solving you," he said, "and it was never because you needed solving. It was because, if I'm useful, I never have to find out whether I'm wanted. I reset the servers in the dark, so nobody would ever get to look at the plain fact of me and leave. I saved your job so you'd stay grateful instead of staying because you chose to. Because grateful I can survive and chosen I have never once risked in my life." His voice went rough, like mine had in the file room, and for once, he let me hear it. You told me you couldn't tell if it was you or your body. I couldn't tell you the truth back because I couldn't tell if it was me or my need to be needed. But the echo's gone now. It's been gone for days. And I'm still standing here with nothing in my hands, and there's no smell making me do this, and no problem for me to solve, and I'm asking you to keep me, knowing that keeping me gets you exactly one thing, which is me, and knowing you'd have every right to close this door. I have spent my whole adult life not trusting the things a body feels. I want you to understand what it meant then, that when I finally reached for him, there was nothing in the air to blame. No cut hay, no warm stone, no biology reaching across the gap to make the decision for me. Just a cold hallway and a man with empty hands who had made himself powerless so that whatever I did next would be only mine. I put my hand on the side of his neck, the same as he had once put his on mine, and I kissed him. It was nothing like the break room. There was no bloom, no third scent, no room going still, no one to convince. It was quiet and undramatic, and it went on, and it was the first thing either of us had ever done to the other, that no instinct required and no crisis forced. And for exactly that reason, it was the most certain thing I have ever done. I had chosen it. With a clear head and empty hands, and nothing in the air, I had chosen him, and I finally understood the difference I had been trying to teach him since the print room. The entire difference between being wanted and being handled, and I had it backward my whole life. I thought the danger was being wanted, when the danger had always been the opposite of that, being managed by someone who called it love. He wanted me. He wanted the plain, unhelpful fact of me, and he had given back every scrap of his power and waited for the smell to leave so that I would believe it. For the record, I said against his mouth, and I could hear that I was almost smiling. I'm choosing you. No echo. Note the timestamp. Noted, he said. And neither of us saw very well by then. And neither of us cared. We took it slow after that, because slow was the entire point, because the whole thing had nearly died from being rushed by biology and rescued by a man who could not stop rescuing, and neither of us was in a hurry to hand the decision back to anything but ourselves. I kept my job, the local role my own numbers had saved after I turned down the carve-out and let the hub transfer go. For the first time, staying somewhere was a thing I had earned instead of a thing I was handed. He kept his floor, though he stopped being the last one in the building, because he finally had somewhere he would rather be. Roland watched the two of us for weeks with an expression I could not read, until I understood it was relief. The relief of a careful man watching two other careful people not make his mistake. The changes in him were small, and I cataloged every one, because cataloging is what I do with things I want to keep. He left the office at a reasonable hour and let the servers fend for themselves, and the building did not fall down. When the coffee machine died that winter, like it always did, he did not fix it alone in the dark. He told the floor it was broken and let them figure it out, badly, and it was wonderful. Because for once, the mess was allowed to be a mess, and nobody's Friday got quietly sacrificed to keep the seam invisible. And once, when I hit a wall on a model and went silent and clipped, he sat down next to me and did not solve it. He just stayed and asked what I wanted done. And when I said nothing, just sit here, he sat there, which for a man like him was a discipline he practiced like a foreign language. And I loved him so much right then that I had to look at my screen. It was months before we let the echo come back. And when we did, it was because we decided to, one evening in my apartment full of field guides, deliberately, his wrist to my throat, and my throat lifted to meet it. Not to convince anyone, not to win anything, not because a crisis demanded it, but because the two of us wanted to make that third thing on purpose. The cut hay came up warm and green between us, the field the morning after cutting, and this time it did not frighten me at all, because this time it was not choosing for us, it was only agreeing. I named a beetle after him, eventually. Not officially, I was quick to tell him, an office thing. A species that had wandered into a client's warehouse and needed identifying, and I logged it in my careful hand with a common name that was clearly, unmistakably, him. And I showed it to him like it was nothing, and watched his face like it was everything. That is how I give a gift, sideways, so that only the person actually paying attention ever sees it. He pays attention. It is the thing he learned that he was not any good at before, back when being liked by everyone had taught him to be seen by the whole world and known by no one. I know him, and there is a bond in our future. One we have talked about slowly, on my timeline, all the terms out loud, so there is no drift, and when it comes, it will come because two people looked at the plain, unhelpful facts of each other and said, knowing exactly what they were getting, keep me. I spent my whole life certain that being wanted was the thing that would cost me myself. It turns out being wanted, actually wanted, by someone willing to stand back and let you be a whole person is the only thing that ever gave me back to me. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.